So let's give you insights then into what came out of that address. And we are joined by political analyst Mcebisi Ndletyana and Stembile Mbete also joining us for reaction. So let me kick off with you, Stembile, and ask you what stood out for you in this evening's address by President Ramaphosa.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tulas and Sally. I think that for me, what stood out about this speech was his comments on GBV and on the double epidemic that we are facing. On the one hand, COVID-19, and on the other hand, gender-based violence and violence against women and children. You know, for what he announced about the advanced level 3 in which businesses would be open, much of that had been already discussed by the Minister for Small Business on Sunday over the weekend. So we could anticipate that that was some of what he was going to speak about as far as COVID-19 is concerned and the lockdown. But I think that what he said today around gender-based violence was really in some ways unexpected in terms of the real openness and vulnerability, I think, that he showed to some extent, but also the statement that, you know, we're so used to hearing political leaders talk about the men that violate women as monsters, but he was very open and frank about the fact that these are men that we live with, these are fathers, brothers, sons, and that men need to do something to deal with the scourge.
I'm going to bring Mcebisi and Ndletyana in now. Mcebisi, is that the most powerful moment of tonight for you? The President talking about these twin pandemics, COVID-19 and gender-based violence, or is there something else that you would highlight?
Well, two things. The gender-based violence was an interesting surprise. I wasn't expecting it, but it's consistent with what government has been saying, really to be consistent with the message against violence and to highlight the plight of women. But equally important, I think, was a very serious message there, a plea with South Africans not to take things easy. Even though restrictions are being relaxed, I think there's a tough time ahead. What is happening now is that, as it is happening throughout the world, is that the country is under severe economic pressure. So we are being forced to open up because livelihoods of folks are being affected, and government doesn't have sufficient resources. Even the money that we thought we would mobilize, some of it hasn't gotten to the intended beneficiaries. So people need to start earning a livelihood. So hence you see an opening, a likely opening of hotels and cinemas and all that. With that obviously means that you will have quite likely less social distancing. What has been happening in America, for instance, with the opening up and everything, you had a spike of infections. And the concern, you know, and I think one should take that concern quite seriously from the president, that relaxation doesn't mean that the virus is no longer a threat. What is really happening is that there's pressure for people to get back to work, and with that, getting back to work raises the risk of infections. So there's a tough time ahead.
Right. So, Dr. Ndletyana, if I stick with you for a moment, let me take you back to the issues he raised around the violence against women in our society. Did he move the conversation any further, though? In as much as, you know, we will be saying that he aptly captured you know, the mood and the situation as we face it currently, and found the words to express it, and gave an account of what has happened in terms of that strategic plan that was promised and those resources that were promised. But did the conversation move any further? I heard talk of legislative you know, amendments and issues around minimum sentences and around bail conditions. Does that move us any further?
I think the very fact that you have violence visited upon women and children is itself tragic. The president, I'm afraid, cannot change things instantly from a pulpit. This is a societal problem. Societal problem, it has to do with how people behave, especially when they're under the influence of alcohol, the patriarchal ideas of ownership of women, thinking that one can do anything one pleases with his partner. So these are societal problems, the value system that we've got to challenge and challenge seriously. But we do need to pay close attention to authorities, especially officials who are responsible for dispensing justice, for arresting people at police stations, for instance. When a woman goes to report a crime like this, you still have policemen who don't take such crimes seriously. You have prosecutors, you even have judges that don't take such crimes seriously. We need to make sure that we have progressive justice. You know this thing, when we appoint judges, we always put premises on race for transformation purposes, but that's okay. But we also need to place primacy on general progressiveness. People who are pro-gender equality, who are anti-homosexuality, those people should not be put on our benches. So more and more emphasis should be put on judges making judgments that progresses our society, making our society a more human society.
Very interesting point that you make there about we need more progressive judges. Sister Mbele, I just want to bring you in on the issue of alcohol. Now, the President speaking about twin pandemics. Alcohol affects both gender-based violence issues and COVID-19. We know that alcohol leads to more car accidents, or the abuse of alcohol, and also leads to more attacks on women. And generally what we see is that our ICU wards are filling up, our beds are taken up, and those are beds that might be needed for people who are desperately sick with COVID-19. And of course we know as well how alcohol can lead to violence in the home. But the President, while addressing the concerns that have been raised by a number of people, among them our Police Minister, the Gauteng Premier, the Eastern Cape Premier, he didn't say that that ban would be in any form put back in place. He didn't even mention that it might be in areas where there are hot spots, where they're desperately running out of beds. Do you think that that's because we simply can't afford to lose this industry? Is it that stark?
Indeed, I think that, you know, what we heard from the President today around the other economic measures as well was certainly an acknowledgement that the government cannot afford to support industry economically with any other funds or with any other bailouts, and that we're going to need to accept the costs that come with the economy being open and running. And I think that the alcohol industry is certainly one of those, both in terms of the manufacture of alcohol, but also the whole supply chain and distribution, right? And so I think that he was acknowledging that, which is why he then focused on the social aspects of addiction, that we're going to need to invest in rehabilitation centres, and that we're going to need to address the social ills that lead to people abusing alcohol.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much to
Sure.
Dr. Sitebile Mbete and also Dr. Mcebisi Ndletyana.
Yeah, fascinating insights. Thank you to the both of them this evening, joining us and unpacking what came out of the President's speech this evening.